Feminism for dummies, as the title of the blog post, can be regarded as cocky and arrogant, and therefore I want to elaborate it a little bit. I wanted to go back to basics with this blog post, since I've seen that there's plenty of room for clarification of what is a feminist and what is feminism all about. For example, from my own life, I have been several times asked the question of, am I a feminist of some kind? In a negative tone, usually coming from people who do not know what is a feminist or understand what feminism is all about, or coming from people who have created very negative connotations towards those words in their earlier life experiences. And to me, such a question of, am I a feminist of some kind, it resonates in a way that somebody was pondering upon the question of, do I have a sense of justice, which would be something abnormal and strange and bizarre. So definitely room for clarification. And the title itself is a way of drawing attention to the matter at hand. For example, I would be very grateful for a blog post called Cooking for Dummies, since the kitchen is definitely a place where I don't master at. So let's start with the person. Who is a feminist? A feminist is a person who is against gender inequality. And when the setting in inequality is the male collective's oppression of the female collective in many aspects, then a feminist is a person who is for women's rights. And here I don't talk about any man in particular or man in singular. It is the male collective as well as the men as a group. But even that is too overly simplifying, since, for example, being a feminist is not set on one's own social positioning. Now, what on earth does that mean? In practice, that means that a man can be a feminist as well. Then the male feminist recognizes the unjust setting between the sexes and is against them in the same way, exactly the same way that a female feminist is. And then, what is feminism? With this blog post, I aim to broaden horizons of understanding of feminism if I just simply can. Because I'm going to say this only one time and one time only. Feminism is not about burning bras and hating men in general. It is a silly thing to say. It is like saying that all the flowers on this earth are lilies of the valleys, or all the animals are Icelandic horses, or all the dairy products are gorgonzola cheese. It's nonsense. It doesn't make sense. So, feminism is a broad thing. To understand feminism as one is understanding feminism as many. And with that being said, feminism is a school of thought. It is a social movement or movements. It's politics, it's value fields, it's individual life approaches, it's history, and much more. And also, at the end, it really depends. The answer depends on the person who the question is posed to. And for example, my feminism manifests differently. As a private person, it is a cornerstone in my value field, and then I manifest it in such a way that I suppose my partner to believe in gender equality as well. I treat people of different genders as equally as I just consciously possibly can, and I vote for a politician who, in my views, contributes to gender equality. And then as a public person, I study a feminist school of thought and gender inequality and equality at the university. I conduct my own feminist research, and I speak publicly about gender equality matters at hand. So here was my individual approach, but then going back to the general level, to scale it down, narrow it down a little bit, I'm using here within this context the historical approach on feminism. So the historical aspect of feminism can be divided into three waves. The first wave And of course, the idea of the gender equality thought spans back or like beyond the time frame of these waves. But the first wave is located at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th. And here the societal construction around that time and at that time was voting rights for women. So here these feminists were called suffragists, which originates from the French word suffrage, which means the right to vote. And nowadays, those feminists of that time were regarded as socialist feminists or Marxist feminists, as among other things. And then the second wave is located time-wisely to 1960s and 1970s. And here, what happened in society at the time was the radicalization of ideas to some extent, and also more free public voicing of opinions, so to say. So, for example, the leftist movements of the post-war Western societies and the lesbian and gay movements, and in the United States, the civil rights movements and the Black Power movement. So here, the second wave feminism can be concluded to one sentence, which is from Carol Hanich. And it is said that the personal is political. Here the difference between the first wave and the second wave is that the second wave feminists were seeking differences. What are the differences between men and women? What are the differences between people of color and white people? What are the differences between the poor and the rich? What we can learn from these differences? What are differences that matter? And here is also the time frame when the radicalization of feminism can be placed. Sexism was seen something in relation to racism, and class relations could be intertwined to heterosexuality. Then, to the third wave of feminism, there are debates and discussions whether or not such a wave even exists, but let's suppose that there does exist the third wave of feminism. Then, time-wisely, it is located to the 1990s, and here the comparison for the second wave feminism of the difference seeking was that the third wave feminism didn't believe that there would be any inherited differences based just on the sex. So it was more behavioristic approach on the individual. So the individual is more of a product of social conditioning. Here also the binary systems were seen as something as harmful and limiting in understanding individual as well as society in general. And it was all about, and it is all about deconstructing categorical thinking, ways of thinking. For example, the binary systems of men and women and subject and object and nature and culture and working life and family life and you name it. There are lots of binary oppositions. They were harmful. And a great example of the literature of this time would be Judith Butler's Gender Trouble, published in 1990, which is one of the cornerstones of queer theory. And queer theory is seen here as something abnormal, something that doesn't fit into the binary system of men and women. So a feminism example of that time and this time would be a post-structuralist feminism, for example. Now I provided you a very quick scratch and an overview of the history of feminism. And here I try to underline that feminism is more than one person. It's more than one trait, one policy, or one idea. It is an entirety of things. To understand feminism as one is understanding feminism as many, as I already told you about. And there is not just one correct way of being a feminist, and all the feminisms mentioned earlier are not the only ones existing. They were examples of those time contexts when I was talking about the waves. And here the question is that, do you believe in gender equality? How do you manifest that belief in your everyday life and decisions? What kind of a feminist are you? Thank you for watching.